You are likely sitting there right now, scrolling through a backlit screen, believing that the little blue dot on your map represents safety, but you are wrong. That blue dot is a targeting beacon, and in the brutal calculus of the post-collapse era, reliance on digital convenience is a primary kill mechanism. When the grid fractures and caloric bankruptcy sets in, the Golden Horde, that desperate, starving mass of millions, will not flow randomly across the landscape. They will flow exactly where the algorithms tell them to go, following the path of least resistance marked on the very same navigation apps you are using today. If a location is pinned, indexed, and routed on Google Maps, it is already compromised. It is not a sanctuary. It is a loot drop waiting to be harvested. The margin of error is now zero. To survive, you must strictly apply hard logic and crowd psychology to the concept of geography. The mob follows the metadata, so safety exists only in the absence of data. We are identifying white zones, areas where the digital eye has gone blind. These are the spaces that exist in physical reality but have been erased, ignored, or deliberately obscured by the digital consensus. If it is searchable, it is lootable. If it can be routed, it will be raided. You must learn to operate in the blank spaces of the map, the areas where the satellite feed blurs and the street view ends. This is not about finding a scenic camping spot. This is about identifying the geographical anomalies that the algorithm has deemed irrelevant, because irrelevance is the only true camouflage remaining. The old world is over, and its maps are now traps designed to funnel you into the meat grinder. We are going to dismantle that trap and look at the blank spaces where the signal dies, because that is the only place your future lives. You scan the satellite imagery and see the crisp, high-resolution details of suburbia, the intricate grid of the city, and the commercial arteries that feed the system. But then, you scroll over a patch of forest or a stretch of desert, and the resolution drops. You encounter a pixelated block, a smear of low-quality data, or a deliberate blackout where the terrain should be. To the untrained eye, this is a glitch or a loading error. To the strategist applying hard logic, this is the first category of the white zone, the censored void. These are the locations that the old world deliberately hid from you. Military installations, government black sites, critical infrastructure hubs, and decommissioned storage depots. The algorithm has been programmed to direct the eyes of the masses away from these locations, which means that when the collapse accelerates and the Golden Horde begins its migration, these sites will remain invisible to the digital scavengers relying on their phones for salvation. The mob follows the bright blue line. They do not navigate into the void. The tactical value of a censored void is derived from its original purpose. These structures were not built by the lowest bidder for residential comfort. They were engineered for survival, security, and endurance. We are talking about reinforced concrete, pre-existing perimeter fencing with razor wire, subterranean levels designed for thermal stability, and established choke points for defense. In a scenario defined by calorie bankruptcy, attempting to build a fortress from scratch is a mathematical impossibility. The caloric expenditure would kill you before the first winter. Therefore, you must acquire a structure that acts as a force multiplier. A censored site offers the highest architectural multiplier available, while the suburbs are burning because drywall stops nothing. The concrete shell of a redacted facility offers ballistic protection and thermal mass. However, you must apply the most ruthless risk assessment to these zones. The very attributes that make them attractive, secrecy and fortification, also turn them into potential kill mechanisms. A redacted site on a map may not be abandoned. It could be an active continuity of government, COG fallback point. If you approach a white zone that is currently occupied by a remnant of the state military apparatus, you are not finding a shelter. You are walking into a kill box. The margin of error here is absolute zero. You cannot assume vacancy. You must assume that the site is either guarded by lethal force or rigged with passive denial systems. Furthermore, the environmental hazards in these zones are non-standard. The censorship often hides industrial toxicity, unexploded ordnance ranges, or chemical storage that has been left to degrade. You are looking for a sanctuary, not a Superfund site. The protocol for engaging a censored void is extreme caution and prolonged observation. You do not drive up to the front gate. You observe from a distance, monitoring for heat signatures, movement patterns, or the rhythmic noise of generators. You are looking for the silence of the grave. Only when you have confirmed that the site is truly a ghost, a hollow shell left behind by the collapse, do you move in to claim it. The censored void is a high-risk gamble, but in a world where the average residential home is a loot drop waiting to be kicked in, the anonymity of a blurred box on a map offers a level of camouflage that no camouflage netting can ever provide. The second category of white zone is the analog artery, often referred to as the ghost road. To understand the tactical necessity of these routes, you must first acknowledge the lethal geometry of the collapse. When the panic hits, the population will instinctually flood the primary and secondary paved roads because those are the only paths they know. And more importantly, those are the only paths their navigation apps will recognize. These asphalt ribbons will instantly transform into linear kill boxes, choked with stalled vehicles, desperate violence, and eventual gridlock that creates a static target for raiders. The Golden Horde follows the path of least resistance, which is always the paved road marked on the map. Therefore, to survive, you must operate on the paths that the digital world has forgotten or never bothered to index. You must locate the veins of the landscape that flow beneath the skin of the official map. Ghost roads are logging trails, fire access lanes, pipeline service routes, and decommissioned agricultural easements. On a standard GPS, these lines simply do not exist. The screen shows a blank expanse of green or gray. However, physically, they are cleared, compacted, and often capable of supporting vehicle traffic or rapid foot movement. This discrepancy between the digital map and the physical reality is your primary defensive asset. By utilizing these analog arteries, you are applying the gray man concept to an entire logistical route. You are moving through the landscape without generating a digital footprint, and more crucially, without competing for space with the desperate masses. While the Horde is killing each other for a gallon of gas on the interstate, you are moving calories and equipment through a fire trail 3 miles away in total silence. The tactical application of the Ghost Road relies heavily on hard logic and the multiplier rule. A road that does not appear on Google Maps acts as a filter. It filters out the unprepared, the dependent, and the opportunistic looters who lack the cognitive capacity to navigate without a robotic voice telling them when to turn. Accessing these routes requires you to abandon the screen and revert to topographic maps and satellite reconnaissance. You are looking for the straight lines cut through forests that have no road labels, the service gates that appear locked but lead to miles of clear track, and the power line cuts that offer a direct line of sight and travel across difficult terrain. However, you must treat these arteries with the same cold objectivity as any other resource. They are not maintained. Bridges may be washed out, deadfall may block the path, and the terrain will punish standard vehicles. This is where the physics of survival comes into play. You cannot navigate a ghost road with a sedan designed for the old world's pavement. You need clearance, recovery gear, and the physical fitness to traverse them on foot if the machine fails. But the difficulty is the point. The friction of the terrain is the barrier that keeps the Golden Horde out. If the road were easy, it would be on the map, and if it were on the map, it would be a death trap. You choose the ghost road not because it is efficient, but because it is empty. In a calorie-starved environment, the ability to move from point A to point B without engagement is the ultimate victory. In the theater of post-collapse survival, you are not just a biological entity, you are an electromagnetic beacon. The moment the old world dissolves, the airwaves will not go silent. They will become a hunting ground. The third critical white zone is the acoustic sanctuary, or the radio dead zone. You must understand the physics of modern warfare. If you emit a signal, you can be triangulated. And if you can be triangulated, you will be engaged. The proliferation of consumer drones, software-defined radios, SDR, and cheap scanning technology means that any group with a basic understanding of signals intelligence can map your location without ever seeing you. Your Baofeng radio, your powered-up smartphone seeking a non-existent tower, and your wireless perimeter alarms are all screaming your coordinates into the void. To survive, you must find the places where the physics of the terrain swallows those screams. A radio dead zone is a geographical area where radio frequency, RF propagation, is nullified, either through massive topographic shielding or specific geological composition. We are talking about deep, narrow valleys surrounded by high mineral content ridges or remote canyons where the line of sight required for high-frequency transmission is impossible to achieve. On a signal coverage map, these areas are the blank white spots where no service is the defining feature. In the old world, these zones were inconveniences that frustrated commuters. In the new reality, they are the only places where you are safe from electronic reconnaissance. By positioning your base of operations within an acoustic sanctuary, you are applying the gray man philosophy to the electromagnetic spectrum. You are disappearing from the sensors that the new predators will use to hunt. You must look at the landscape through the lens of signal attenuation, not just visual cover. A dense forest hides you from the naked eye, but it does nothing to stop a thermal drone or a radio scanner. A deep limestone gorge, however, blocks both. The tactical advantage here is absolute. While the Golden Horde and the organized raiding parties scan the horizon for electronic signatures, looking for the noise of civilization, you exist in a pocket of silence. This is not about ludism. It is about counter-surveillance. You can still possess technology, but within an acoustic sanctuary, you control the leakage. The terrain acts as a natural Faraday cage, preventing your local electronic noise from spilling out into the wider world, where it becomes a beacon for a kill mechanism. However, the psychological discipline required to inhabit these zones is severe. You will be cut off from the flow of information that the rest of the world is dying to access. You will not know the movement of the Horde until they physically breach your horizon. This is the trade-off required by hard logic. You trade the comfort of information for the security of obscurity. In a world where information is weaponized, ignorance, when strategically chosen, is a form of armor. You must learn to trust your local physical senses over digital inputs. The acoustic sanctuary forces you to return to biological situational awareness. If you are not willing to embrace the silence, you will eventually be found by those who are listening for the slightest whisper of a signal. The fourth category of the white zone is the hydro blind spot. When you look at a digital map, water is rendered as a uniform, featureless expanse of blue. It is treated as a negative space, a barrier where the road network terminates. To the algorithm, a river or a coastline is simply end of data. To the Golden Horde, it is a physical wall that blocks their migration. But to the strategist applying hard logic, this blue void is a sanctuary hidden in plain sight. We are talking about the uncharted river islands, the reservoir maintenance peninsulas that appear disconnected from the main road, and the coastal pockets labeled as non-navigable or simply ignored by the satellite rendering engine. These are the hydro blind spots. They exist outside the consciousness of the landlocked masses because they require a change in state from pedestrian to mariner to access. The tactical value of the hydro blind spot is twofold: isolation and caloric density. First, water is the ultimate moat. In a collapse scenario, the Golden Horde will be defined by caloric conservation and the path of least resistance. They will not swim across a freezing river with a 5-knot current to investigate a patch of trees. They will keep walking down the paved road. By positioning yourself on a river island or a marshland peninsula, you utilize the physics of the environment to create a perimeter that requires zero manpower to man. You are leveraging the crowd's inability to navigate aqueous terrain. Second, and most critically, these zones directly address the threat of calorie bankruptcy. While the suburbs starve and the grocery stores are looted within 48 hours, the hydro blind spot offers a renewable calorie stream through fishing, trapping, and access to water for stealth agriculture. You are not just hiding. You are refueling. However, the entry price for this zone is high. You cannot retreat to a hydro blind spot without the operational capacity to navigate it. This means you need a vessel, a kayak, a john boat, a raft, and the skill to operate it under load. The physics of water are unforgiving. A mistake here does not result in a stumble. It results in hypothermia and drowning. The margin of error is zero. You must treat the water as a lethal entity that works for you only as long as you respect its mechanics. The hydro blind spot is a filter that screens out 99% of the population who are biologically and logistically tethered to the asphalt. If you can float, you can vanish. While the rest of the world burns on the shore, you drift in the blue void, invisible to the map and unreachable by the mob. The final category of the white zone is the Entropy town. The digital map is not an objective reflection of reality. It is a commercial index designed to facilitate consumption. The algorithm prioritizes activity, capital flow, and population density. When a settlement loses its economic viability, a mining town that went bust, a logging camp that closed down, or an unincorporated territory that lost its zip code, it is effectively delisted from the modern consciousness. It may still appear as a faint label if you zoom in far enough, but it is stripped of the metadata that drives the masses. No gas stations, no grocery stores, no reviews, and no blue navigation lines. To the Golden Horde, these places do not exist because they are not destinations. They are entropy towns, places where the structures of the old world still stand, but the data stream has dried up. The tactical value of an entropy town is rooted in the law of conservation of energy. In a survival scenario, calories are your most finite resource. Building a shelter from scratch, felling trees, mixing cob, digging foundations is a massive caloric expenditure that can lead to calorie bankruptcy before the first frost hits. An entropy town offers you the shell for free. You are acquiring windbreaks, rain covers, and thermal mass that would take you months to construct, simply because the rest of the world views them as garbage. While the mob fights to the death over a suburban drywall box that offers zero ballistic protection, you can occupy a brick industrial office or a stone foundation in a town that the map forgot. You are scavenging the corpse of the industrial age to build a lifeboat for the collapse. Crowd psychology dictates that the desperate will flock to where they remember resources being. The Walmarts, the distribution centers, the cities. They view a ghost town as a place of lack. You must view it as a place of potential. The lack of active resources is exactly what keeps the loot drop hunters away. You are not looking for a stocked refrigerator. You are looking for a fortress that doesn't need to be built. These locations often have legacy infrastructure, old wells, cisterns, and wood stoves that function perfectly well without the grid. They were built before the era of smart homes and fragility. However, hard logic requires you to assess the entropy factor. These structures have been fighting gravity and weather without maintenance for years. You are not walking into a move-in ready home. You are entering a hazard zone of rotting timbers, black mold, and potential industrial toxins. You must bring the skills to stabilize, not just occupy. But the trade-off is undeniable. You are trading the high-probability violence of the populated zones for the structural labor of the forgotten zones. You are betting that it is safer to fight a leaking roof than to fight a starving mob. In the calculus of survival, anonymity is the highest form of armor, and nothing is more anonymous than a town that the world has already mourned and buried. The old world is over. The safest place to be is where it has been over for a long time. We have identified the 5 categories of safety, but identification is not ownership. To survive, you must transition from digital dependence to analog mastery. The protocol is simple, but non-negotiable. Acquire physical topographic maps immediately. USGS quadrants, aviation charts, and old street atlases from before the digital era. These are your primary documents. Then, perform a negative space analysis. Compare the physical map against the digital satellite feed. Look for the discrepancies. The road that exists on paper but not on the screen. The town named on the 1990 atlas that is missing from Google Earth. These gaps are your targets. But remember the final rule of hard logic. The map is not the territory. A white zone on paper could be a swamp, a cliff face, or a guarded compound in reality. You cannot bet your life on a hypothesis. You must put boots on the ground now, while the grid is still up and the fuel is still cheap. You need to verify the line of sight, test the soil, and measure the water flow. If you wait until the collapse to find your sanctuary, you are already dead. The margin of error is 0. The old world is fading. Turn off the screen, unfold the map, and go find the place where the blue line ends.